Have you ever replayed a tough conversation in your head, wishing you had said things differently? Maybe it was asking your boss for a raise, telling a loved one some hard truth, or resolving a conflict with a friend. We all face these moments, the conversations we dread, avoid, or stumble through. But what if I told you there's a method, developed at Harvard, to turn these painful talks into opportunities for learning, growth, and stronger relationships? Today, we'll explore the powerful insights from difficult conversations. How to Discuss What Matters Most by Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen. By the end of this video, you'll walk away with a complete framework to handle any hard discussion, with clarity, confidence, and compassion. Why conversations become difficult. The authors begin by pointing out that a difficult conversation is anything you find hard to talk about. Whether it's work performance, money, family issues, or personal conflicts, these conversations trigger anxiety because the stakes feel high, emotions run deep, and outcomes are uncertain. The dilemma is familiar. If you avoid the conversation, resentment builds. If you confront it, you risk making things worse. Many people hope for a diplomatic hand grenade, a way to raise issues without fallout. But the truth is, there's no magical way to deliver bad news without consequences. The solution lies not in avoiding conflict, but in transforming how we approach it. And that's where this book helps, by shifting from a message delivery mindset to a learning conversation mindset. Chapter 1. Sort out the 3 conversations. The authors begin by revealing an essential truth. Every difficult conversation is actually 3 conversations happening at once. Most of us think we're arguing about one thing, the facts, the behavior, or the issue on the table. But underneath, there are layers we rarely acknowledge. Unless we learn to recognize these layers, we'll find ourselves stuck in endless cycles of frustration. The 3 conversations. 1. The what happened conversation. This is the surface-level debate. What actually occurred? Who said what? Who's responsible? Who's right and who's wrong? This is usually the battlefield where people clash the hardest. 2. The feelings conversation. Beneath the facts, every difficult talk carries emotional weight. Are we angry, disappointed, disrespected, or hurt? How do we feel about the other person's actions, and what feelings do we sense they're experiencing? Even when unspoken, emotions shape how we perceive and react. 3. The identity conversation. This is the most hidden, but also the most powerful. It's the internal talk we have with ourselves about what the situation says about us. Am I competent or incompetent? Am I a good or bad person? Do people respect me? Or am I being taken advantage of? Our identity is at stake, and when it feels threatened, conversations spiral out of control. Example, Jack and Michael. The book introduces Jack, who rushed to finish a project overnight for his friend Michael, only to be criticized harshly for minor errors. On the surface, the argument seemed to be about whether the chart was acceptable. But deeper down, Jack was thinking, this is the thanks I get? I stayed up all night for you. Feelings conversation. He was also questioning, am I incompetent? Did I fail as a professional and as a friend? Identity conversation. Michael, on the other hand, was stressed about deadlines and worried he'd made a poor judgment hiring Jack, his own identity conversation. The author's insight is that acknowledging all 3 conversations helps us step out of autopilot. If we only argue over facts, we miss the real issues, the emotions and identity concerns driving the tension. Chapter 2. Stop arguing about who's right. Explore each other's stories. Our natural instinct in conflict is to fight for who's right. But the authors emphasize a radical shift. The goal is not to prove who's right, but to understand each other's stories. Why who's right fails. Different information. People notice different details. You may have observed something the other didn't. Different interpretations. Even if you saw the same facts, you may interpret them differently based on past experiences, cultural background, or assumptions. Different priorities. What matters most to one person might not matter at all to the other. This means that truth in human interactions is rarely absolute. It's subjective and shaped by perspective. So instead of asking, who's right, we should ask, what's their perspective? What story are they living in? Example: imagine two co-workers clashing about a project deadline. One says, "You're irresponsible. You missed the deadline." The other replies, "You're unfair. Your expectations were unrealistic." Both believe they're right. But beneath the fight are two stories, one about dependability, the other about fairness. Only by hearing both stories can they find a solution. The shift: move from certainty to curiosity. Instead of making declarations, ask questions. Try, "Help me understand what led you to that decision." By exploring the other story, you expand the conversation from a debate to a dialogue. Chapter 3. Don't assume they meant it. Disentangle intent from impact. One of the most common and damaging mistakes in difficult conversations is assuming that impact equals intent. If someone hurts us, we leap to the conclusion that they meant to. This assumption fuels resentment and defensiveness. Why this matters: intent is invisible. We can't see another's motives. We can only infer them. Impact is undeniable. We feel hurt, disrespected, or frustrated. But that doesn't prove intent. False assumptions escalate conflict. When we assume malicious intent, we treat the other person as an enemy, not a partner. Example: your colleague interrupts you in a meeting. The impact: you feel dismissed and angry. Your assumption: they're trying to undermine me. But their intent might have been excitement, stress, or even nervousness. By separating intent from impact, you can say, "When you cut me off, I felt ignored. Was that what you intended?" This opens the door to clarity instead of hostility. The technique: instead of accusing, share the impact and inquire about intent. This creates space for the other person to explain while still validating your feelings. Chapter 4. Abandon blame. Map the contribution system. When things go wrong, our instinct is to assign blame. But blame is like pouring gasoline on a fire. It fuels defensiveness, escalates conflict, and shuts down problem solving. The authors argue that we should replace blame with joint contribution. Why blame doesn't work: it focuses on punishment, not solutions. It ignores complexity. Most conflicts are not caused by one person, but by a web of actions, choices, and circumstances. It prevents learning. When people are busy defending themselves, they can't reflect honestly on their role. Contribution instead of blame. Instead of asking, "Whose fault is this?" ask, "How did each of us contribute to this situation?" This reframing reduces defensiveness and encourages honesty. Example: a project failed. The manager blames the employee for sloppiness. The employee blames the manager for unclear instructions. In reality, the manager gave vague guidance. The employee didn't ask clarifying questions. The team faced unexpected external delays. When both map their contributions, they see the fuller picture and can focus on fixing the system instead of attacking each other. Practical tip: use contribution mapping. Draw a diagram of all the factors, actions, inactions, misunderstandings that played a role. This exercise shifts the focus from finger-pointing to problem-solving. Chapter 5. Have your feelings, or they will have you. One of the biggest mistakes people make in difficult conversations is trying to ignore or suppress emotions. We often convince ourselves that being rational means setting feelings aside, but in truth, feelings are always present. And if we don't acknowledge them, they will control us. Why feelings matter? They leak out anyway. Suppressed emotions show up through tone, sarcasm, passive-aggressive behavior, or sudden outbursts. They drive the conflict. Many arguments are less about the facts and more about how we feel treated, disrespected, unappreciated, or excluded. They carry meaning. Emotions tell us what truly matters to us, whether it's fairness, loyalty, respect, or safety. Owning your feelings. The key is to bring feelings into the conversation responsibly. Instead of blaming others for how you feel, express them clearly and without exaggeration. For example, unhelpful: "You never respect me." Helpful: "I felt hurt when my opinion was dismissed in a meeting." The first invites defensiveness. The second opens space for understanding. Example: a father constantly criticizes his son's grades. The son explodes in anger one day, saying, "You don't love me." The father is shocked. Beneath the fight about grades is a deep need for acceptance. If the son had expressed his feelings earlier, "I feel discouraged and unworthy when you focus only on my mistakes," the conversation could have been healing instead of explosive. Takeaway: if you don't have your feelings will have you. Naming and expressing them constructively is the only way to keep them from silently sabotaging the conversation. Chapter 6. Ground your identity. Ask yourself, what's at stake? Difficult conversations don't just challenge our emotions, they challenge our sense of self. This is what the authors call the identity conversation. The identity trap. When conflict threatens how we see ourselves, we feel destabilized. Common identity questions include: am I competent or incompetent? Am I a good person or a bad one? Am I worthy of respect, love, or trust? When the conversation feels like it's testing these core beliefs, we can lose balance, either by becoming defensive, shutting down, or overreacting. The solution: adopt a more complex identity. Instead of clinging to all-or-nothing self-images like, "I must always be competent," or "I must always be good," embrace a more balanced perspective. I can be mostly competent but still make mistakes. I can be a good person who sometimes hurts others unintentionally. This flexibility gives us resilience. We can admit fault, accept criticism, and learn without crumbling. Example: a manager struggles to give feedback because she fears being seen as mean. But when she reframes her identity, "I can care about my team and still hold them accountable," she gains the confidence to have tough but necessary conversations. Takeaway: grounding your identity means preparing yourself before the talk. Ask, what's really at stake for how I see myself? Can I accept being imperfect yet still valuable? This self-acceptance reduces defensiveness and helps you stay steady. Chapter 7. What's your purpose? When to raise it and when to let go. Before entering any difficult conversation, it's crucial to clarify your purpose. Too often, people go in with hidden or misguided goals, like proving they're right, winning, or punishing the other person. These aims almost guarantee escalation. The 3 purposes that work. 1. Learning, understanding the other person's perspective and sharing your own. 2. Improving the relationship, reducing tension and building trust. 3. Problem solving, working together to find a constructive way forward. If your purpose doesn't include at least one of these, it may not be worth having the conversation, or at least not yet. Knowing when to let go. Not every difficult conversation is worth pursuing. If your main driver is revenge, proving superiority, or venting, it might be better to pause. Timing also matters. If emotions are too raw, waiting can be wise. Example: 2 siblings argue over how to care for their aging parent. One wants to confront the other immediately about being lazy. But if the real purpose is to improve cooperation and ensure their parents' well-being, reframing the talk around shared goals will be far more productive. Takeaway: always ask, what's my real purpose here? If your purpose aligns with learning, relationship, or problem solving, proceed. If not, consider letting it go. Chapter 8. Getting started. Begin from the 3rd story. How you start a difficult conversation often determines where it goes. Most people begin from their own perspective, which makes the other person defensive. The authors introduce a powerful tool, the 3rd story. What is the 3rd story? The 3rd story is the neutral description of the situation, told as if by a fair observer. It doesn't assign blame or judgment. It simply acknowledges that 2 different views exist. Example: instead of starting with, "You're always late and inconsiderate," you might say, "We seem to have different expectations about time. I'd like to talk about that." This framing acknowledges the difference without attacking. Why it works: it shows respect for both perspectives. It reduces defensiveness. It sets the stage for curiosity and problem-solving rather than argument. Practical steps. 1. Describe the issue neutrally, as an outsider would. 2. Acknowledge that both perspectives matter. 3. Invite the other person to share their view. Example in the workplace. A manager and employee disagree about workload. The manager could say, You're not pulling your weight. That's an accusation. Instead, the third story might be, it seems we have different views about how much work should be completed each week. Can we explore that? Takeaway. How you begin shapes everything that follows. By starting with the third story, you frame the conversation as a joint exploration rather than a battle. Chapter 9. Learning. Listen from the inside out. Listening sounds simple, but in difficult conversations, it's one of the hardest skills to master. Why? Because when emotions run high, we're usually more focused on defending ourselves than on truly hearing the other person. The authors stress that listening is not just about staying quiet. It's about cultivating genuine curiosity. The temptation to defend. In tense situations, most of us listen only to reload. We're waiting for the other person to finish so we can fire back with our counterargument. This isn't listening, it's debating, and it fuels escalation. The skills of deep listening. 1. Inquiry. Ask open-ended, non-judgmental questions. For example, can you help me understand what led you to that conclusion? This shows genuine curiosity. 2. Paraphrasing. Reflect back what you heard to confirm understanding. So what I'm hearing is that you felt excluded when decisions were made without you. This reassures the speaker that you're trying to understand, not dismiss. 3. Acknowledgement. Validate their feelings, even if you disagree with their perspective. Saying, I can see why you'd feel that way, does not mean you're conceding the point. It means you're recognizing their reality. Example. Imagine a heated argument between two co-workers. One says, you never support me during meetings. Instead of replying defensively, the other could say, it sounds like you felt alone when I didn't speak up. Is that right? This simple acknowledgement can dramatically shift the tone. Takeaway. Listening from the inside out means setting aside the need to defend and focusing on understanding. When people feel truly heard, they naturally become more willing to listen in return. Chapter 10. Expression. Speak for yourself with clarity and power. Once you've listened and understood, it's your turn to express yourself. But here too, the way you speak can either inflame or calm the conversation. The authors encourage speaking with clarity, honesty, and responsibility. The power of I statements. Accusations like you're selfish or you never listen trigger defensiveness. Instead, use I statements that describe your perspective and experience. Accusation. You always ignore my ideas. Constructive. I felt frustrated when my suggestions weren't discussed. The difference is profound. The first judges, the second reveals personal experience. Avoiding exaggeration and absolutes. Phrases like always, never, or everyone agrees tend to escalate conflict. They oversimplify and make the other person feel unfairly attacked. Instead, be specific about instances and impacts. Example. Instead of, you never appreciate me, try, when I worked late last week and it wasn't acknowledged, I felt unappreciated. The second is clearer, less accusatory, and harder to dismiss. Balance honesty with care. Speaking your truth doesn't mean being harsh. The aim is clarity without cruelty, sharing your perspective while respecting the other person's dignity. Takeaway. When you speak responsibly for yourself rather than labeling the other, you empower the conversation to move forward instead of spiraling into defensiveness. Chapter 11. Problem solving. Take the lead. After listening and sharing, the next step is problem solving. The mistake many make is trying to jump into solutions before truly understanding each other. But once both sides have been heard, problem solving becomes collaborative instead of adversarial. From positions to interests. People often argue from positions what they want, but solutions emerge when you dig into interests, why they want it. Position. I need this report by Friday. Interest. I need time to review it before my Monday presentation. When both sides explore underlying interests, they often discover multiple solutions. Brainstorming options. Rather than locking into one solution, generate several possibilities. For example, instead of fighting over one deadline, you might agree on a draft Friday and a final version Monday. Criteria for solutions. They should address the core interests of both parties. They should be realistic and fair. They should be created together, not imposed. Example: two roommates argue about cleaning. One demands a strict schedule, the other resents being micromanaged. By discussing interests, they discover the first wants a clean space to feel relaxed, while the second values flexibility. Their solution: general standards with shared responsibility, but freedom in timing. Takeaway: problem-solving works best when you lead the process away from positions and toward shared interests. Collaboration replaces combat. Chapter 12, Putting it all together. In the final chapter, the authors weave together everything into a unified framework. They remind us that difficult conversations don't have to be battles. They can be opportunities for learning, understanding, and growth. The integrated framework. 1. Shift from a message delivery stance to a learning stance. Instead of thinking, "I need them to understand me," think, "I want us to understand each other." 2. Sort out the three conversations. Recognize the factual debate, the feelings underneath, and the identity concerns at stake. 3. Separate intent from impact. Don't assume motives, ask. 4. Replace blame with contribution. Explore how each side added to the problem. 5. Acknowledge and express feelings. Don't bury them. 6. Ground your identity. Remember you can be imperfect and still worthy. 7. Clarify your purpose. Engage only if your goal is learning, relationship, or problem solving. 8. Begin from the third story. Frame the issue neutrally. 9. Listen deeply. Show curiosity, paraphrase, and acknowledge. 10. Speak with clarity and care. Use I statements and avoid exaggeration. 11. Problem solve together. Focus on interests, not rigid positions. Example of it all in practice. Imagine two business partners at odds over financial decisions. By applying the full framework, they start neutrally by acknowledging different perspectives. Third story. Listen to each other's frustrations and financial goals. Express feelings of stress and fear without accusations. Recognize their shared contributions to the tension. Clarify that their purpose is to strengthen both the business and their partnership. Finally, brainstorm financial strategies that meet both their needs. The result isn't just a solution to the problem. It's a stronger relationship and a renewed ability to work together. Final takeaway: difficult conversations will never be easy, but they can become less threatening and more productive if we shift our mindset. When we listen, express, and problem solve with curiosity and respect, even the hardest talks can become turning points rather than breaking points. Questions people ask about difficult conversations. In the expanded edition, the authors address common questions, such as, what if the other person won't change? Then focus on what you can control, your own clarity and integrity. What if emotions overwhelm me? Then prepare beforehand and take breaks if needed. What if the power dynamics are unequal? Then use the same framework, but adjust expectations. These FAQs remind us that while difficult conversations are never easy, they are navigable with practice and the right tools. At the heart of difficult conversations is this truth. The goal is not to avoid conflict or to win arguments, but to create learning conversations, moments where honesty, curiosity, and respect can turn struggle into connection. Next time you face a conversation you've been dreading, remember, listen deeply, speak authentically, and focus on shared understanding. You might just find that the conversation you feared most becomes the one that brings you closer to others. If you found this summary helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into life-changing books. And let me know in the comments, what's the most difficult conversation you've ever had to face?